I don't think I ever really believed everything.
And I realized that quite a few of the things didn't hold water.
The actual religions were man-made from wherever.
God? Who's God? What's God?
I think skepticism really is the first step.
Scientific zest and zeal for the real world.
That was it. I was an atheist from then on.
Do you think God would really want to do these kind of things to people, like Moses killing an entire nation?
We are talking to our friend Willie about his road to atheism. So, were you brought up in a religious household?
No, I wasn't born in a religious household, although I lived with people who went to church de facto. Most of the parents didn't go, but because, you hung out with your friends on weekends, Sunday was church. So it was a Catholic church, and on Saturdays we played, and Sunday we went to church. Most of us didn't really know why, but that's what everyone did, so that's what we did.
Kept you out of trouble.
Right, so to speak,
yeah.
right.
So your parents didn't go to church?
No.
Okay, so just you. And did they have any activities in the church that you found interesting?
Well, it was a Catholic church, so they had the usual,
Stations of the Cross
and
things like that.
During, the Good Friday weekend, Easter, the holidays, the normal, events that occurred. But like I said, we basically did it to hang out with one another at the church. And but then little by little we started telling it and kind of accepting it. And then once in a while they'd have these plays that they actually would put on with characters about the crucifixion of Jesus. And they made it so real, like you kind of felt like this must be true. So I grew up in an environment where your parents, teachers, police, priests, they never lied to you. That's what we were told.
Right. So
by default, we felt no one lied to us. I shouldn't. They told us the truth. Otherwise, what's the point?
Okay.
So when they told us, God exists and Jesus existed and this is what happened, okay, fine.
It was accepted.
It was accepted without question.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you were an infant, you were baptized?
Yes.
And when you were...
Christened?
Holy
confirmed.
Communion.
Yeah,
the Holy Communion.
Or whatever.
I had Holy Communion at the age of 9.
Confirmation.
And I had my confirmation when I was 12. And I even went to catechisms, and all that stuff. And kind of had arguments with the priests there because a lot of the stuff didn't make sense, but kind of went along with the program about,
what age were you
seeds of
then?
doubt then were planted.
Were planted. What age
I was a teenager. I was just starting to go to high school. And, I was just, some of the things I was listening to just didn't make sense.
Yes.
So I said, and then,
such as what things didn't make sense?
Well, the whole notion of the crucifixion. The first thing was the virgin birth. So I said, how do you take a biological phenomenon like a birth and make this an exception when it violates the rule?
It's called a miracle.
And miracles, like I said, well, how do you know it's a miracle? So they kind of you said, don't argue about it.
Yeah.
It happened.
That was in high school. Okay.
Yeah, that was in high school.
Okay, so that you started on the road then. You were about 14,
15
years of age.
Yeah.
And were you involved in any programs in science or math or things that might have influenced you at the time?
Yeah, once you go to high school, you start learning biology, chemistry, physics, and astronomy. Now, once I started studying astronomy, that's when it really started.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
Huh? It seems that most of the people that we have interviewed at that astronomy and astronomical things that have occurred seem to be the starting point of making sense of what doesn't make sense. Yeah. Isn't that something? So you're joining the club.
Yeah, and biology, of course, because once you study the birth of animals and people, how does this reconcile with what I'm being taught, in the church?
And anti-gravity, walking on water, and all the other wonderful...
and all the rules that they made you follow, like we had to go to Saturday afternoon, or actually evening, we had to go to confession.
Yes.
Even if you didn't do anything wrong, you were told to go to confession.
Wow.
For what? And then you had to say all these things well, I did something stupid. All right, say 25 Our Fathers, 16 Hail Marys, and everybody did it.
That was to get you used to doing something like that. That's the days of the counting the beads and where the church was full. Have you noticed something about the churches now?
They're practically empty.
That's right.
also you were a vampire. You're eating the blood and the flesh of Jesus. I mean, that really.
Well, yeah, I didn't take communion that frequently because I found it, repugnant. I just, for some reason, everybody else did, but I just said, I'll skip this. And, the nuns and the fathers, they frowned upon it. Like, why aren't you doing this? I said, they just don't want to. So it wasn't like they're going to twist your arm to make you do it. They kind of
Not these days.
They sort of like give you a cross look and like, okay, this is a bad one. Watch out for him. But
Actually, a smart one.
Yes.
And also the idea that you couldn't eat meat on Friday had all these little silly rules, and I was like, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
Okay. But you kind of did it because your parents encouraged you to follow them, not to question authority.
You're a learned person. You read a lot. Did you read the Bible?
Oh, yeah, I read the Bible because we had to, once we questioned something, the father or the nun would ask us to read passages of the Bibles. And then you would ask, like, well, this happened. Is it historically accurate? And they would say yes. But there was no way at that time for us to actually do research to investigate it. So we just took it for granted that if it's in the Bible, because they told us it was the inerrant word of God, and God wouldn't lie to you, so that must be true. It's kind of a logical, backward logical approach to the whole phenomena of understanding, concepts.
So millions and billions of people do the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
They take
Did you
it for
read
granted.
the Bible in its entirety? Because what they do is they'll tell you the little pieces that agree with what they're trying to sell you.
Right.
They cherry pick, whereas if you read the whole thing, you go, oh my goodness.
Well, I didn't start doing that until I actually went to college. I kind of I was more independent. So what I did was I actually was helping a blind woman, and she was extremely religious. So I was, and she was blind. So I took her to church and brought her, and she read the Bible. So we kind of let's read this together. Because she actually went to Bible study classes and so on. So I drove her wherever she needed to go. So I said, let's read this thing from beginning to end and see what we can make of this. And that's what we did. We spent like 2.5 years going over it very carefully and slowly, deliberately. And I would ask her, I said, Alice, does this make sense to you? Well, it's kind of weird, but I guess it must be true. I said, but why? And do you think God would really want to do these kind of things to people, like Moses killing an entire nation and raping women and killing children? Doesn't that sound bizarre?
Everybody taking women as prisoners for
and I'm like, that just seems kind of strange to you.
What about Revelations? Did you read that?
Yeah, we read Revelations, and that was like a horror story.
It is usually said that if you read Revelation, that's the quickest way to become an atheist.
It was like, I couldn't imagine. It sounded like something in science fiction.
Yes.
It did. When we read it, it was like a science fiction
or
novel.
bad Lovecraft or something.
Yeah, it was just so bizarre. And
the moon stands, the pregnant woman stands behind the sun, hidden behind that, but puts a foot on top of the
stars
moon.
Or something.
And then you have a dragon that its tail wipes out a third of the stars in the sky, but yet is small enough to land on Earth. Isn't that amazing?
Well, it was just... so we went through it, and then I think some of the people from the lighthouse that I worked with kind of sort of like just because I was questioning so many things that made them feel uncomfortable. So we kind of like but we did read the whole thing. And I said, you need to understand it. It's an entire book. It's not just, cherry-picked kind of things that, that suits your needs. Because when she went to Bible study, that's exactly what they were doing.
Yeah.
They were cherry-picking.
They were cherry-picking and really, not giving her the entire...
Right. If they do the Ten Commandments, they'll do it from the fourth on, never the first two or three, because it just doesn't make much sense.
Which,
first one is love. I shall
have no other gods before me.
Well, that makes sense because he doesn't want them worshiping somebody else.
He's a jealous God.
That's why he's called jealous.
Yes, he's a jealous God.
Yeah, and then not only that, but the things they don't tell you is the fact that if you do happen to work on a Sabbath day, that you're to be stoned to death.
Right.
You see, that's the part they don't like to talk about.
Yeah, the one I never got was coveting thy neighbor's wife or his ass. I can swear I have never coveted my neighbor's wife nor his ass. And since this happened right after, Exodus, after they escaped slavery, why didn't he say, thou shalt not enslave others? Think how much misery would have been spared in the world if he had those 5 little words instead of thou shalt not covet. And I mean, that really confirmed it for me when I was a teenager, that he was actually pro-slavery.
Right. There are parts, that's right. What is it? Luke 12, verses 47 and 48 says that it's okay to beat your slaves by so many stripes if you don't give you a full adherence to allegiance to your master. And if you don't work or do the full work of that, you're to be hidden. And that happens to be the key thing for the slavery part and beating by so many stripes as to what occurred in the South. And they had the Civil War and everything because the Bible Belt said, well, if the Bible says it's okay, guess what?
But one takes that in the context of the time that this occurred.
Well, true believers don't take it into context.
No, but I'm just saying, if you look at it, it was the Middle East 2,000 years ago where 97%
well, 3,000 years ago, actually. It's the Old Testament.
Right. But I'm just saying, the whole notion of having slaves, that was quite commonplace.
But I mean, if it was a really benign, well, not far-seeing God, you would have thought he might have said something about that.
Right, that's true.
Deuteronomy, Leviticus, and the rest. But what about the idea that the earth was that the heavens were created on the fourth day?
Right.
When you have between 200 to 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy, and between 150 to 200 billion galaxies in the known universe, the trillions upon trillions of planets that will have been found, as they are finding now, and all that was done in one day, and yet it took 5 days to create little old Earth. Isn't that amazing? That's why astronomy becomes very interesting.
There are two lists of what he created when, and in one of them he created the sun on the fourth day. Right. How can you have days without a sun?
Right.
There are two Genesis, by the way, too.
Yeah. Oh, I know that.
There are three Ten
But there are no contradictions in the Bible.
Yes, there are.
Well, we know that.
740 contradictions, many errors, and a lot of plagiarism. Yes. So what happened now? Did you find that when you went to college
Well, I kind of spun off to do my undergraduate work in sociology, and then eventually went to Columbia University to do my graduate work. So I kind of got away from a lot of that and just focused on working and going to school. But in the meantime, what I was doing was reading a lot of books on the historical Jesus.
Yes.
I always found that whole phenomenon of this life from different perspectives, different authors, scholars, and lay people. So I read maybe about 42 different books on the historical Jesus.
That's good coverage.
Just to get the different perspective and how he was viewed as a the type of things that he taught versus what people believed he was. So I kind of focused in on that for a while. But then all of a sudden, once I finished that, I said, there's got to be something else besides
Darwin?
this. I had read Darwin in college, so I kind of understood that, high school and college. So I kind of put that for the back burner to use that later on. And what happened, out of curiosity, I picked up this book called Atheism, A Short Introduction. And I said...
The author is?
Julian
Baggage. What happened was I just out of curiosity had run across atheism, but hearing about Madeline O'Hare, I said, let me see what this atheism really is all about. I've heard it, but never actually investigated it, per se. Right. So I picked this book up at a library once, and it said, 92 pages can't be that bad. So I read it, and I started getting really curious about it. I said, wow, it makes a lot of sense. More so. And then from there, I read The Atheist Universe.
Very good. That's what I...
And that was the second book I read, and that convinced me. I said, that was a book that put me over the hump.
Yes.
And the author is?
That's, I forgot, David Mills.
Right.
David Mills wrote that.
It's a very, very good book. Suggests that everybody get a chance.
And that was the book that kind of, because it was very matter of fact, very simple, nothing complex. Because many of the atheist books can get very complex in the logic and the reasoning, understanding concepts and terms. And but he made it very matter of fact and understand why should you believe certain things and why things don't make sense and how they don't coincide and the contradictions and all these kinds of things. And that's, from there I just started reading more and more and more. And I've read about maybe 50 different atheist books.
That's good.
But, you just read them for different ideas and different takes on things. And I found that if people use logic, basic logic 101, that would help most Christians understand the epistemology of faith.
Well, that's why they don't want critical thinking taught in school.
Even
if you didn't want it in school, if you want to be a Christian, but you want to investigate or evaluate what you believe, then you have to question yourself and say, well, what's the epistemology of faith? What do I believe? What I believe, and how do I know it's true? And that's the road you have to take if you want to be an honest, knowledgeable individual.
But so many people are just brainwashed into not even thinking about it. Though I think now with the internet,
the internet
one teeny tiny little doubt might make them, pretend that they're believing and they're looking it up and go, what?
Yeah, because that's what I do. I kind of like use my knowledge that I've gained over the years and say, listen, I'm not saying that you can't believe, you don't have the right to believe in what, but I'm saying question what you believe. That's all. Investigate it. Look at the epistemology of what you believe.
Question everything.
And just be a skeptic. Just don't
Ask
take it
the
on.
next question,
Yeah,
as Ted Sturgeon says.
Right. And once you're willing to do that, who knows?
Yeah.
You may maintain, like some people feel they're just good Christians because they believe in love. And that's all they're concerned about, not the whole thing with Jesus and God and all that. They just leave that aside. But as long as they feel that they can get some of them like the tenets of Jesus, like the Sermon on the Mount kind of stuff. They want.
But most of that's already been pieced together from parts of the Old Testament.
Right.
So if you know your Bible.
Did you have any problems with dating or on the job? Let's say having pressures on the job.
No. I mean, I told people I was an atheist. I was.
And how were the reactions?
Well, some people like, what, you don't believe in God? And I said, no, of course not. Why should I believe in something that there's no evidence to prove? I mean, if you want to believe in it, that's fine, but you're believing, there's no evidence, and you're not using reason.
And your family, when you came out?
They didn't care.
They didn't care.
Because they were never religious to begin with. As long as I was happy, they're happy.
You got a good family.
So my father and mother's like, okay. Not really. I mean, it doesn't affect my life to the point where being an atheist versus not being an atheist makes a difference. It makes a difference to me, to myself, in terms of understanding and exploring other areas of life, like science, more complex science.
It didn't affect your job
But it doesn't affect my job, my social. I hang out with people who are Christians. I hang out with atheists because we don't get into these arguments about whether you're right or you're wrong or, you should do it this way, that way. We don't even get into that. Like, I just allow people to believe what they want to believe, but if they want to debate it, let's debate it intelligently and honestly.
We're very lucky we live in New York City, as opposed to other places where it's very hard to...
I've gone to the South. Just, a friend of mine lives in Georgia, and we used to play bridge together. We were bridge partners in tournaments, but he retired and went to Georgia. So I would sit down and discuss with him, and he's like, well, how do you know about this universe? And where did the universe come from? I said, listen, you leave that to the scientists. We'll just discuss things that you and I understand. And but we have this understanding that, look, I'm entitled to believe what I want to believe. You're entitled to believe your belief, and we're still friends. But he's a Christian, and it doesn't bother me.
I think this is important for those that out there listening to this, that you can still have a good life and get along with a number of people, and still, if questions are asked, you have a background which you can talk about and not be fearful of it. However, obviously, it depends on your job. It depends on the neighbors with you. That might be a little bit different than what he has had. So this is something to take in consideration when stepping out of the closet, as it were, on the road to atheism.
Once I got past that and understood much of what I read about atheism in terms of it being skeptical, now when I read things, I tend, even scientific or psychological, books about advancing human civilization, I'm more skeptical about things in terms of what are the possibilities, as opposed to just accepting what I read. In the past, I would read a scientific passage and say, okay, I believe that's true, but now I'm not accepting it so readily. Like, for instance, I was reading the idea that did Jesus actually exist, which I never questioned. I just assumed Jesus existed like Hannibal or Alexander the Great or any other famous individual. But then I started reading books that started to question the fact whether Jesus was really a person. And I read a lot of Bart Ehrman's books. I mean,
he's great.
I read about 14 of his books. And the one that really impressed me a lot was, why do good things happen to bad people? Because he's an agnostic. But he really points out that, what kind of God do we have that allows bad things to happen to good people? And then, the Christians will say, well, it's free will. We give them free will. So, and this is God's judgment against us for doing bad things. So we have hurricanes and typhoons and so on. And that's the punishment God metes out to us. But, I mean, those sort of things, led me to read other books by scientists, astrophysicists, even physicists now. I'm reading books on physics and trying to explore other areas and realms, which I think atheism helped me to explore those areas, which I might not have done, if I'd just been a Christian. I mean, there's pros and cons to all sides. Because I talk to people like, what do you get out of being a Christian? Because I have a person in the office who goes to church every day. And I said, well, why do you feel the need to go to church every day? And he said, well, it just makes me feel better. It doesn't really do anything per se, but it just makes me feel better as a person. I get along with people better. I don't argue as much. And he said, well, he has his reasons for doing what he does.
It's known as the poor man's psychiatrist.
Okay, that's fine. But I'm saying if it works for him, and I even told people that I was working for a prison system. I donated books to a prison, atheist books to a prison, because I felt they were getting too much religious stuff and not enough having I told the person who was running the program, look, they need to get a more balanced, side of this equation here. So when I delivered them, she asked me to come in and talk to them. And I said, listen, if religion works for you and you're not going to go out and rob people, kill people, that's fine with me, because that's what some of these people need. Because people said it. I left prison, I became a religious person, and now my life has completely changed. I don't rob, I don't steal, I don't do drugs, I'm married with children, and everything's fine. I said, if that works for you, fine.
Right.
It's just everyone has their cup of tea, that sort of crossed the bear,
How did you, when did you become involved with the New York City Atheist Organization? And what made you get involved?
I don't remember if I saw it online. I think I saw it online in a meetup. Mm-hmm. And so it's like finding like-minded individuals just to see what they had to say and where this was going. Because as I saw some statistics that less and less people were attending church, so to me it felt like more and more people were leaning towards agnostics or being atheists. So I said, well, let me see what this community is all about and how can we, as a group, branch out to reach out to other people. Because I'm not here to convert people, really. I'm trying to get people to just think for themselves. If you want to be a Christian, that's fine, but just think about it. Why are you a Christian or why are you a Muslim? Because most people, if you live in the Middle East, you're a Muslim. If you live in India, you're a Buddhist. I mean, you're a Hindu. If you live in the Far East, you may be a Buddhist. So
in fact, a lot of your Muslims,
where you're born.
Your Muslims or Islamic religion is practiced a lot and converted in jails. They have become very, very much so, and that's one of the reasons why I believe you said, let's get a balance in there, and that is true.
I think one of the reasons was, I think Malcolm X pointed out in one of his books, he said that Islam, at least for him, being a black man and being persecuted in a white country, he felt that Islam had more to soothe him as a black man living in white America. And he felt that the teachings were more inclined to associating with people of color. He could identify more so with people of color, even though there are white Muslims, throughout the world. But he felt it was just with the teachings of Islam, what just suited him at that time. Don't forget, he was inculcated in jail by other Muslims, and it worked, and it got him to the point to read, become more educated, and so he felt this was the only way to get out. This was the avenue for him, and obviously, history proves that it worked for him.
Of course they
did. They did, yeah.
All did.
I mean, if you look at the Crusades, I don't know, for Malcolm and other people that I've spoken with, like I speak to people on the bus in my neighborhood who are Muslims, and they say most of it comes from their family. They're born in these communities, so that's why. I said, but why don't you ever try Christianity, or why don't you try Hinduism or Buddhism and see if that works for you? He says, no, because all my family members are this, and I'm not going to leave my family for something that...
And it could be ostracized.
But I think it's actually against
their
Islam
religion.
If you do leave the religion, according to the very strict form, that you could be killed.
You will be killed.
You will be killed, yes.
And one of the important things I try to...
Sharia law.
Sharia law. And one of the things you try to impart is, if you believe that your religion is the right religion and all the other ones are wrong, then you're an atheist except for one religion. Yes. In effect.
Well, we have the expression, the only difference between you and
is one religion.
Is one God.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's, like I read the book called The Outsider Test of Faith by John W. Loftus, where he asks Christians to examine themselves, their religion, the way they examine other people's religions. And that's what they need to do.
That's what they need to do. Absolutely right.
The Romans used to call the Christians atheists.
Right.
Yes.
Back when, and I asked people, I said, Are you an atheist? He said, no. I said, you believe in Thor? You're an atheist? No.
That's right.
Take him right down the chain, you know?
Right. And that's pretty much what I do now.
So
you know?
Dawkins does. Yeah.
So I don't beat it over people's head, but if it comes, because sometimes people will see me wearing this A around my neck, and they say, "What's that?" And I tell them.
Gives you an
So it's like a
opportunity.
talking point.
Yes.
And so people will ask you, like, "Why did you become an atheist?" And I explain to them, but I'm not saying that they're wrong. See, because right away, if you tell them you're an atheist, they think that I believe that they're wrong for being a Christian or Muslim or whatever. And I said, no. You're brought up one way, and I just believe different things than you do because I believe in reason and logic, critical thinking, and that's what I try to use.
Reasoning, right.
And I think that atheism is more, and when you're dealing with belief and the subject of belief and belief, you're not dealing with logic and reason. There's just no thing. They're not congruent. They can't coexist.
If you could reach those out there listening to this, for those who are sort of in the closet and are just about opening the door and taking that road to atheism, what advice would you give them?
Well, if they have doubts, try to network or reach out to either organizations or it depends on some people are extroverts, some people are introverts. So if you're kind of shy and you're not really skeptical of talking about it with others, feel comfortable, you might want to go online and look some material up first. Like I did. I mean, I wasn't going to talk to people about it. I wanted to read it for myself. I can read, and I can reason. So I decided to get a small little book on Introduction to Atheism and things like that, or just find small websites. There's tons of websites on atheism and agnosticism.
And you hear the debates. And
you can listen to the debates on YouTube.
Yeah.
YouTube has tons of debates.
Tons of debates.
So it depends on how much time, energy, and effort you're willing to put into it as well. Because it's not going to happen overnight.
How do you think the future will be? How do you think it will turn out?
I suspect a lot of this religion will be here for a very, very long time, only because when you have 5.2 billion people who believe in some kind of religion, and it's constantly being done, even now as we speak, children are being...
There's a changeover, as you notice, from the established churches to the mega churches,
Right.
and from there, most of the people say they have a spiritual feeling. They don't necessarily have a belief in one specific thing, but a spiritual feeling, meaning there must be some higher up force or something like that.
Well,
it's just going through stages to eventually,
It's
who
an
knows what in the future it may not
It'll
be.
be like an evolutionary process.
That's right.
We'll eventually get to the point where it won't be a big deal. It's not like it is today. I suspect in 100 years from now, if you were to come back and look at what happened to religion, like, what are you talking about? We don't do that anymore.
I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Susan.
you.
Very glad to hear your opinions about this.
No,
And
my pleasure.
the books that you're reading, and I just encourage others to do the same thing, to go out, be involved, attend organizations such as Atheists, whether it's on a national or local basis in your community, and you'll be surprised. Open your eyes, open your minds, and think constructively and creatively.
Ask
Thank you.
the next question, always.
Thank you.